Hello to all of you wonderful moms out there. Welcome back to Achieve Your Ambitious Mom Life. I'm your host, Anoki Kapasi, and I'm thrilled to be bringing you part 2 of my powerful conversation with Dr. Jihane Farrell. Jihane has a PhD in cell biology and has worked in biomedical research for over a decade, including anti-aging research. And she now hosts her own show called the 40s Fitness Reset podcast, with a mission to help adults over 40 lose belly fat and build muscle to experience life to the fullest and to live longer. If you missed part 1, I highly recommend going back to episode 77, where Dr. Jihane shared her raw journey through burnout and that identity crisis, which eventually led to her transformation and her overcoming all of the burnout that she was experiencing. Today, though, we're going to be diving into the how part of her journey, the step-by-step process that she used to rebuild her life with intention and to create lasting balance. In our conversation, we talked about how tapping into your core values allows you to come back to yourself after feeling a bit lost. Why raising a child is one of the most meaningful ways to have a positive impact in the world. She talks about the practical mindfulness and meditation techniques that helped her regain emotional mastery, and also the powerful shift that happens when you stop blaming all of the external situations of your life and start taking some personal agency. You're going to learn how to recognize your unique stress signature before burnout ever takes hold. And also, if you're experiencing burnout, part of overcoming burnout involves using some actionable strategies for creating priorities that reflect your values rather than other people's expectations. Finally, we discuss why approaching motherhood as a higher calling can actually transform both your experience and impact. And on the other side of her transformation, today we find Jihane hosts her own podcast, runs a successful coaching business, and homeschools her children, all while maintaining the balance that she has fought so hard to create. If you're ready to stop living in misalignment and you want to create a life that truly reflects who you are and what matters most to you, this episode is going to give you the inspiration and the practical guidance that you need. So let's dive in together. Are you looking for a way to blend success and motherhood without losing sight of who you are? I get it. I've been there too. Hi, I'm Anoki, a PhD researcher, business owner, and homeschooling mom of 2 boys. As your life coach, I help moms like you create a life you love at home and at work. If you're ready to stop feeling overwhelmed, overscheduled, and overlooked, and want a clear roadmap to a balanced life, a meaningful career, and finally feeling like yourself again while being the awesome mama that you are, you're in the right place. In this journey to create the life you truly desire, it's time to rediscover your dreams and achieve your ambitious mom life. We haven't really talked about fully how you transformed out. We talked about that you have to do this process of self-discovery. But if you had to maybe talk about it chronologically and maybe even stepwise, how would you describe that transformation process? And I want to bring you back to something you said about sort of coming back from the dead. You know, you had to sort of bury this person that you were and coming out of it, because I hear moms talk about feeling like they're mourning the loss of who they were, that pre-mom identity. I'm not talking about like the burnt out version, but the mom that had a drive, the woman that had a drive. And while we might be excited about our roles as moms, there's a part of us that we are mourning. And so how to come out of that and come back to life again. I want you to talk about that transformation process.
Sure, Anki. And I totally get that. When you become a mom, it's a bit of a death to self, right? Because your whole life now is about caring for this little person, and it's so involving. It takes every part of you. Your physical, your body is involved, your mind, your heart is involved. So it was very hard for me to go through the burnout, but I also, hindsight is always 20/20, and after some time I realized this was kind of a grace of God on my life. I didn't realize that when I was in the middle of it, but I've learned so much from it, and it kind of prepared me for motherhood, because then for me that the transition from career to motherhood was not as stark a contrast, right? I didn't go from workaholic in my academic position to being a mom. I kind of had that period in between, and in a way I think this was kind of a setup.
So your self-discovery work was really done before you became a mom.
Before I became a mom, yes.
And it led to you probably choosing this more well-rounded life.
Exactly. And what you described, I embraced motherhood with because of all of the things I had done before, I embraced motherhood with this intentionality, a strong sense of this is a different mission. And this is also a high calling. That's a very important mission for me. Being a mom is about, raising the next generation. And I was in research because I wanted to have a positive impact in the world. Raising a child is having a positive impact in the world when you take that mission to heart, right?
Bingo.
So,
yep.
Yeah, exactly. But I don't think I would have approached motherhood with that mindset if I had not gone through the burnout. And then you're asking me how I came back from life. So for me, if I was to put that in sort of a step by step, one thing that was instrumental for me was getting some sort of, I don't want to say control or management, some awareness and some mastery around my emotions. And the way I achieved that at the time was through mindfulness meditation. That was a big part of my recovery. That helped me accept what I was going through. It helped me gain a sense of perspective on what I was going through, and taking responsibility for where I was at I cannot stress enough how important it was, because I could have blamed the circumstances. I could have blamed the environment I was in. I could have blamed a number of things, but I decided that I was going to take responsibility for this. And that gave me so much agency, because as I said, so there's things I couldn't do anything about. My workplace, the lack of acknowledgement, the fact that things were not quite fair, I didn't get rewarded for my work. Those things I had no control over. But my excessive drinking, my eating patterns, my diet, exercise, all those things are things I could take control over, and I did. So that was a big part of my recovery, was fixing the physical. And then in terms of the more, what we're calling the inner work, self-discovery, I knew that for me, what mattered was meaning. I wasn't seeking happiness. I was seeking meaning. And for me, that's a huge difference. It makes a huge difference, because sometimes the things that bring us meaning don't necessarily make us happy in the moment. But I wanted to have a life that mattered. So my question was, how do I have a life that matters? And so that was kind of my guiding principle, was meaning. And I learned about my core values through my experience of burnout. I realized that that's a part of the story that I didn't tell, but telling the truth is one of my core values. And I realized that through the burnout, because this was something that created conflict in my work environment. So I realized that being truthful was something that really mattered to me. And that put me onto this path of discovering my values. And I established a list of my core values. And that's also how I got to be introduced to coaching. I'm now a coach. And the reason I chose this path for me is because I still am driven by this idea of having a positive impact on people's lives. But I realized that when I was doing that in the lab, there were certain values I was not in line with. And discovering my values allowed me to find a new path, and a sense that I was coming back to myself. Something that I had lost in my previous position. And this is where this idea of misalignment comes. I love the way you put that. So that was about getting realigned. What matters to me? What is important to me? What are the things I'm not able to compromise on? What are the things I'm going to stand for, no matter what? And those were things I was standing for in my previous job, and that created conflict. That put me in a situation where that participated into me losing my position. So I realized, okay, I'm standing up for this. This is one of my core values. And then choosing a path where those values were there for me, and I couldn't.
Yes, I mean, that's so wonderful. I love so many things about what you just said about meaning being your guiding principle and just having a life that matters. That's actually, part of my tagline is just really using life planning as a tool to making a difference, to having impact, to basically essentially what you said. So I 100% love and agree with everything that you said. And yeah, you basically were life planning maybe without even realizing it, because, you have to define what your purpose is. I mean, life plan is more just doing it at a more formal process of what you just described. Everything you said is exactly that. It's just being able to articulate, what brings you meaning, what your non-negotiables are, your priorities, your core values. The core values are the foundation of everything that you do, every aspect, your purpose, your vision, everything is all sitting on your core values. And so when you talk about your career, and realizing that a lot of things, maybe the environment, maybe the specific type of work that you had to do wasn't in line with your values or who you are, that's why it feels like you're fighting against yourself. And that's why when you said that coming back to myself, when you started doing this inner work, that is like, I couldn't have said it better. That is exactly what this process is supposed to do for you. Like, I was getting giddy when you're talking about just the effect it had on you, the change it had on you. And that's a lot of times I feel like, specifically with a career, what happens is after we become a mom, the kind of career and the goals we're shooting for no longer feel aligned with who we are, because motherhood being such a big life transition, and so this is really true for any big life transition, not just motherhood, often makes you discover more things about yourself and you realize what's important to you. And so it starts to highlight those misalignments, any gaps between what you're doing and what you really want or need or what brings meaning, like you said. It highlights those differences. And so those are actually, those big life transitions are also opportunities and triggers for you to realign. And so that's why a lot of times in motherhood, when we, especially high achieving women, have not done the process that you're talking about, it was such a difficult journey that you've gone through. And I don't mean to overlook that in any way and dismiss that, because you talked about it being years of having to go through this. But I actually think you are lucky that you were able to do this process before becoming a mom, because most of your motherhood has now since been on this real Jihane, right? You know?
That's
and
so true.
I really actually feel so happy for you that you were able to do that. But a lot of times I talk to women who just don't feel like themselves anymore. They feel like they lost a part of who they were, and they're living a life like they don't want to give up motherhood and their family, but they feel like their life is working against it. There's all this friction. And so, yeah, just I really appreciate all of the things that you said and understand the journey you went through, even though the specifics of what you went through are not necessarily my story. I think it'll resonate with a lot of women.
Well, Anoki, I just want to say really quickly, those feelings it's real. When we transition into motherhood, we do lose some parts of us, and it is a shift in identity. And so it's not something to be dismissed. It's something I think to be recognized. And I think what you're doing is really helping moms transition from one thing to another and regain this feeling of being in control. But it's so real. So going through this process of, just getting back to my purpose, my core values, putting more direction in my life, I've often thought about this. I've seen other people go through a burnout, lost their job, and I've seen people staying stuck in a place of feeling bitter and angry and resenting, like feeling like they had been a victim of something, and staying stuck in that place of depression. I went through, the depression was there, like, because there is the grieving of who you were and having to find a new direction in life. And I've seen people who did not take ownership of that, did not really have a process to go through. And I've seen people stay stuck for years and maybe, who knows, life in that place of, for me, the way I picture this is I was kind of in a pit, right? After I went through the burnout. And some people stay in the pit because they don't have the process to get out of there. They don't have a way to bring light into what has happened to them, take on ownership, rewrite the story, maybe make sense of what happened to them. And they stay there and there's no way out. They're depressed, they're resentful, they're bitter for the rest of their lives. And I just want to highlight that, Anuki, because it is a thing. Some people stay stuck there. And that process that you help people through, it helps them get back in control of their lives and be able to rewrite the story, become the new narrator of their lives. And that's really, it's so important.
Yeah, when you say that there are people out there who just stay stuck forever, that just makes me so sad. And it really just underlines why, I do what I do. And I know you help a different side of it, but you help as well. Thank you for sharing that. That was really good. And recognizing what we don't have control over as well. But I think that sort of, like you said, taking responsibility and accepting is really important part. So yeah, everything that you're saying makes so much sense. And what can you do to ensure that the things that you're doing, whether it's your work or your relationships or just how you spend your time and energy, stays aligned with, now that you've done all this inner work, moving forward? How do you ensure that you don't end up in the place that you were before and that you can maintain this alignment?
What a good question. For me, I think it comes down to reflection. It comes down to always coming back to purpose. And to be honest with you, Anoki, sometimes I feel like choosing purpose, it's not always easy to choose purpose. Sometimes choosing purpose means you might pass on a job opportunity that maybe would bring more financial blessings or freedom, but you choose purpose to stay aligned. I guess for me, it's thinking about the finish line, and thinking about when, again, I'm a believer. So for me, the images that come to mind is at some point I will be facing my maker, my creator, and he will ask me for an account of what did you do with this life that I gave you? For people who are not believing it, and maybe just this idea of being on their deathbed and looking back on their life and, those long days at work, is that really what's going to matter? So kind of thinking about the end of your life, and when you look back, what do you want to see? What what are
The legacy, right? That
Yes,
we talk a
yes.
lot about that, the legacy you want to leave.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a good way to put it. The legacy, what you're gonna leave behind, what are gonna be the what are gonna be the fruits of what you have done through your life. So
Mm-hmm.
I think that is something that I'm pretty conscious of and something that is really guiding me to help me stay in line. But also, through everything that I've gone through, I've gained a lot of awareness. And, we discussed this idea of being irritable. And like before I did the inner work, I did not really realize this was an issue or a red flag. And now it is. And one of the first signs for me that I'm going back into this sort of a burnout pattern is being irritable. And these days it's towards my husband a lot. So anytime I'm in that place where I feel the frustration and I start to focus the frustration on him, then I know I'm like, okay, I need to reassess. I might be doing too much. Where can I scale back? Where can I cut? What are the things I can let go of today or this week or whatever? And I started to do this a bit more intuitively, but having that awareness is also something that helps me stay aligned.
So good. You mentioned a couple things about living in your purpose isn't always the easy thing to do, right? It's probably the right thing to do. It's just not easy. When you start doing it and you're on the process, it feels right because now you're really doing something that's more in line with who you are. But it's not always easy. And you gave the example of maybe giving up the more prestigious job or doing things that aren't necessarily fitting society's idea of what you should do. Yeah, so it sounds like some of the stuff that you did that seemed to be working for you, that you did to get yourself back to a better place, now it sounds like you're a mom who I believe homeschools her children and you're running a business and you started a podcast. So how do you create some boundaries with your work and your family and your time to ensure that you don't find yourself back in a situation of burnout?
Good question. So I guess coming back to this idea of purpose, there's something that came up to me is also the fact that, I'm up early in the morning. I work when my kids are sleeping, and what gets me out of bed is purpose. I wouldn't have this type of energy to be up so early in the morning if I was going to do a job where I feel I'm not aligned. So that's something I maybe want to communicate, is that when you feel like you are in alignment, you are focused on your purpose, there's such an energy, such a life force that comes in you. And now, my purpose is pulling me as opposed to me trying to push behind my goals. And psychology shows us that it's a thing. And really, that's something I want to communicate. Purpose just gives so much wind in your cells, right? And the way I make sure I don't end up in the same burnout situation is, like you said, boundaries. So, to be honest, I could probably do a little bit better. Some days I find that my work creeps in during the day, but what I try to do is to work in the margins. So when my kids are sleeping, and then once they're up, this is family time. We do breakfast, we do school at home, we do activities, we get out, I take care of my family, and it's just like switching hats. And again, I want to reiterate that for me, being a mom is a really high calling. Taking care of my family is a high calling. In the past, I might have looked at my current role today. My previous self could have looked at it and be like, oh, you're just a maid to everybody else in your family. You put yourself last. That is not the way I look at it. And I think this mindset is huge. Yes, I do serve my family, but I take comfort in it. I take pride in it because I truly believe it's a high calling. And that goes to also, my husband. I'm the one cooking at home, but I am proud, and that's something that is very important to me, to put meals together that are healthy, high, it's like nutrient dense. I go out of my way to get good stuff, organic stuff. We go to a farmer's market, which is super fun, by the way. But that's very important to me, that I do that for my husband and my children. And I strongly believe that when you're a mom and you take this role to heart, you're not a maid. You're the cornerstone of your house. By doing that, and when you embrace this idea, then there's so much, you take a lot of meaning out of it, and there's so much joy because you know that what you're doing is making a difference. And it's impacting your family, but the way you impact your family also impacts society at large. And I truly believe that. And I think for high achieving mom, that's a big one, right? Because what brought you to this role at work in a career is probably a desire to impact the world positively, and we can bring that same mindset into our families. And so the way I try to not end up in a burnout is to be very aware of my personal I have sort of that's something I teach to people, is the stress signature. So for me, being irritable towards my husband, I know this is for me a signature through stress. I might be in that zone where I've been doing too much and I need to scale back. So being aware of my personal triggers, my personal stress, this sort of things, but also being intentional about like I work out a few times a week, being intentional about scheduling this and making this a priority, so that I don't feel like I'm constantly pouring out and I'm never pouring in. So I have certain practices that I have, whether spiritual or physical, that help me feel like I am pouring into myself before I can pour out to others. And then, like you said, boundaries. So there is a time for work, there's a time for family, there's a time for homeschooling, there's a time for cooking meals, and just accepting the fact that the distribution of that time, it's like I might have 10% work, 10% self-care, 80% taking care of others. Probably it's kind of that distribution. So having the mindset that when I'm in that 80% of taking care of others, that does not mean that I do it at the expense of myself, but that's just a different calling that is on my life. Yeah, that's, I guess it always comes back to purpose, right?
So I think getting back to pursuing a certain career, for example, as a specific example, and then coming into motherhood and feeling like you said, you find yourself in a position where you're constantly serving others and almost doing what sometimes I feel like are menial tasks. Like I'm literally getting on my hands and knees and cleaning the floor and things like that, while everyone else, they're making their messes and whatever. And I have to teach and pick up the mess along the way. It can feel like all of a sudden I'm a failure. All these big, important things I wanted to do, I'm not doing them anymore. But like you said, like those are the things you think you need to do or wanted to do. But when you really sit down and think about what is really important to you, that mindset you talk about, that's what gets you out of feeling like a failure, because you realize, oh no, these are the things that are important to me and I am doing them. And if I'm not, these are the things I can do to get back to doing what's really important to me. And I love that once you come into alignment, even the most nitty gritty elements of your life are also aligned. Like you talk about embracing this role of cooking, and you don't just see it as a task that you have to do on a day-to-day basis. It is this purpose you have as part of, I know you have the health and fitness, business, but it's, even if you weren't in that business, you see it as this mission to place meal after meal, healthy, nourishing meals that are going to feed your family's bodies and help them grow and, fill their potential. It's so much of a higher calling. Also, recently, I've experienced this idea of needing to slow down because I started this business as an idea of wanting to add in some flexibility into my life and be able to be more in control of when I work and not and stuff. But I started to get to a point where, again, I lost sight of that, and it was taking over so much more of my life. And it wasn't until I had a conversation with my husband where he opened my eyes to the fact that the whole purpose of why I had shifted from one type of work to another type of work, I was burying all of that and throwing myself into my workaholic tendencies again. And so now I've come back to starting to intentionally slow down. What I'm trying to achieve on a day-to-day basis on the business front is so much more different than I started off with. So anyways, I think that, a lot of what you said was just gold about how to balance. So
now that you say that, actually, I realize, and something I may not have thought about before, but having those boundaries, having this 80% that is focused on my family, that might be protecting me from burning out again. Because what you just said, right? You said, oh, now this business is kind of taking over. I have times like that where I feel like I want to work because I love what I'm doing. I'm getting so much meaning out of it, but I could get easily lost in this and have that take over again. So my kids, the time with my family, it's actually probably a way to protect myself from burnout.
Yeah. I've been on this mission for the last 2 years to really establish these family traditions. Like you say, you go as a family and you go to the farmers markets. And so we have little traditions we've built in, and I just love that they are my anchoring points. It's exactly what you said. It's the antidote to burnout. So I just have one more question. I teach moms how to create impact by showing up authentically at home and at work. So what does it mean to you to live a meaningful life and to make a difference? And I know that has essentially been the topic of this conversation, but if you could just say it in a very succinct couple sentences. As you said, to have a life that matters.
I think for me, it comes down to still think about this moment at the finish line and being able to look back and have a sense that you were dealt with very specific cards in your hand at the beginning of your life. How did you play those cards? You have some talents. How did you put them to use? You had some life experiences, some better than others, but how did you use even the difficult moments to bring something beautiful out of them? And for me, it has a lot to do with helping people around you, right? Whether it's your family or even strangers. I feel like a lot of meaning in life has to do with working on something bigger than you that transcends who you are. And I think it has a lot to do with helping others. For me, a life that matters is a life where you were intentional about transcending your personal experiences so that you could benefit other people.
That makes so much sense. Thank you. I could see that you were digging deep on that one. Well, talking about helping others, you continue to do that. And you really have, I think, maybe been inspired or drawn from the experience that you had. You said that part of your transformation involved the physical transformation as well. So can you tell us about your business and how you are helping others? I know that on the family front and all of that, you have a purpose and you're helping as well, but you have a business that I'd like to hear more about.
Sure, Anuki, thanks. And yes, so this whole thing, the burnout, the inner work and all of that just put me on this path of indeed helping others. And because I come from the background of anti-aging research, I kept working on this science of aging, longevity. And so I now help people to work on this on the physical fitness level. So helping people lose belly fat and build muscle to live longer, because there is a connection between all of those things and their longevity. And so these are the things that I've been going through, the process that I have personally put in place for my life. And I now help people do the same.
Wow, that is so awesome. I think when it's coming out of a personal experience like that, the conviction and the energy behind it is so much stronger. And I love that you've been able to meld the experience and the expertise you have from anti-aging and just your personal transformation and being able to help others in that way. It's just really inspiring. So yeah, I think a lot of times when people might find themselves dispassionate about what they're doing at the present, they don't realize that the answer is actually within them and that they can actually draw that inspiration from within themselves to turn it into something beautiful like you have and really helping others and creating impact. So thank you for telling us about that. Yeah, I think it's really interesting to hear about people's self-discovery journeys and how you did the inner work to align your life. Thank you so much for being so generous with your time and sharing your experiences on the show. And how can people, my listeners, connect with you and find out more about your business or just wherever you show up? Tell us all the places.
Sounds good. Okay. Actually, there's really just one place where I'm showing up right now. And again, that comes back to this idea of having partitioned my time so that I can show up with purpose in every area of my life. So where I show up right now in terms of helping others is my podcast, the 40s Fitness Reset podcast. So they can find me on all of the podcast platforms. And it was a great pleasure to discuss with you today. I love sharing my story, and I truly hope someone gets something out of this. That's really all that matters to me.
That is so precious. Thank you so much for saying that. Okay, ladies, so there you have it. Jihane Farrell of the 40s Fitness Reset podcast. I'm going to link her show and the information in the show notes. And I really love that you were able to share such an honest, raw story of yours. And yeah, if you want to learn more about what Jihane teaches, then please go check out her podcast. It's really good. I've already listened to a couple of episodes. Thank you so much. Okay, that was incredible. That was the second part of my two-part conversation with Dr. Jihane Farrell. I feel so grateful that she was able to share this journey from burnout to now having a more balanced life. She's living life on her terms. In part one, we explored Jihane's experience with severe burnout as a cancer researcher in academia, and she really openly shared about how she found her entire identity was wrapped up in her work. She had a lot of workaholic and addictive behaviors, and she simply couldn't take it anymore. We discussed some of the red flags for burnout that high achievers frequently ignore, whether that's irritability, exhaustion, or even declining performance. Well, Jihane eventually experienced her breaking point, and so today's episode picked up from there, and we got to see how she transformed her life now into this more balanced and purposeful life that she is now creating impact both in her home and through her work. We really went deep into Jihane's step-by-step transformation process. She explained how she gained awareness and mastery over her emotions. She took responsibility for the aspects of her life that she actually had control over. She was able to start finding meaning rather than just happiness. And we even explored how she was able to tap into her core values and ultimately start going on a path that was more aligned with who she truly is. Jihane shares so much practical wisdom about how to work within boundaries, how to lead an intentional life, and start incorporating some self-care, and how you can shift your mindset so that you can be a mom who sees motherhood as a higher calling rather than as a burden. The life that Jihane has created now honors her purpose, and her journey reminds us that when we align our work with our values, we maintain these healthy boundaries, we can actually create a truly balanced life, and we can start living on our own terms. So if you're struggling with burnout or searching for more balance in your life, just remember that it really does start with reconnecting with yourself. Look at your core values, look at your purpose, and understand what is going to bring more meaning in your life. Then you can start being intentional about how you spend your time and energy. Thank you for joining us for this powerful two-part conversation. And until next time, I'm Anoki Kapasi, helping you achieve your ambitious mom life. I hope today's episode will help you create time and freedom to pursue something you love to do. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe and tell other purpose-driven mamas about it. Who knows? You might even make a new friend by sharing a tip. It's all free. By the way, it would be amazing to hear what you think about the show when you leave a review on Apple Podcasts. After all, my passion is to make this a great experience for you. I'll see you next week for another episode of Achieve Your Ambitious Mom Life with Anoki Kapasi.